We can't hear you, Prof. Mbatha.
No, I was saying, Sam, if you could just give us a few minutes, yeah, to just allow more people to come in. Otherwise, they're going to be coming in and moving through the front.
No problem.
So, you know, normally the events at Rhodes, they start at 15 minutes past 2. So,
Oh, yeah.
Afternoon, colleagues.
you're going to be live.
Hi there. That's much.
Thank you.
So we just we're coming on soon. Just going to give it a few more minutes.
Hi, Sam, you can go for it.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, well, good afternoon to everyone, and thanks very much for joining us for the seminar today. Before we begin, just please note that the proceedings will be recorded, and they'll later be made available on the ISER YouTube channel, as well as across the other social media platforms. I'm going to leave most of the speaking up to the guests today, but just very quickly, let me set the scene a little. So basically today's seminar deals with the ongoing issue of land management. In particular, it's concerned with the struggles of small farmers and how they seek to improve their access to markets. I also want to say that even though we will have a main speaker and a respondent to kick us off today, this should be seen as an open-ended discussion in which everybody will have a chance to speak. We'll keep time open for everyone to ask questions and share their own knowledge after the speaker and respondent have spoken today. So with that in mind, let me introduce our main speaker, Prof. Mbatha. As many of you will probably know, he's the director of the ISER at Rhodes. Prof. Mbatha is co-leading a science cluster on land and investments in Africa for the Future Earth Africa Hub. Previously, he worked at UNISA, where he was the founding director of the Young African Leaders Initiative for Southern Africa, and also acting dean in the School of Business Leadership before he joined the ISER in 2020. So we're also lucky to have Dr. Binganitso Muchara as a respondent. Dr. Muchara is a senior lecturer in the School of Business Leadership at UNISA. He holds a PhD in agricultural economics from UKZN. His research interests are in water resource economics, agribusiness, and value chain analysis, as well as water governance. He has led the Water Research Commission project on water use and food value chains of indigenous crops, with special focus on production and post-harvest handling of food products. Prior to joining the business school, he worked in various capacities in the private sector, in research and consulting services, in economics, water resource management, value chain analysis, and socioeconomic surveys. Since 2007, Dr. Muchara has conducted academic research for several projects funded by organizations, including the Water Research Commission, Oxfam, FAO, DAFF, and USA. So before we kick off, just to note a few things about how the seminar will work. Prof. Mbatha will speak for roughly 30 minutes, and then he'll be followed by a response from Dr. Muchara, which will go on for about 15 or so minutes. Thereafter, we will have time for questions and comments. So just a note to those who are joining us online, please post your questions in the chat box throughout the discussions. After the presentations, we will attend to those. And also for those who are attending in person, please feel free to share your questions with us during the question and answer session at the end. Okay, great. So without further delay, it's my privilege to hand over to Prof. Mbatha.
And I also just want to say that if there aren't many questions, we will allow people online to unmute and present their questions by themselves. Thank you so much, Chair. Yeah, I thought it would be important to just acknowledge Paul Cilliers. He passed away in 2011. I met him at Stellenbosch. I think he was the director for the Complexity Institute there. The thinking behind the way I looked at this research report in particular was guided by some of his thoughts. And I would also like to acknowledge the fact that this research did not start in Mbatha. It actually started in the eastern part of Kenya, around about 2018. It may have been by accident that it ended up being in Mbatha, and I'll explain how this happened. So I was interested in research on market access, in land reform research in various aspects of where we're having blockages in terms of trying to implement the land reform project. And I'll also explain and list where these challenges are in the system in a more systematic way. In any case, the upper uMzimvubu River catchment itself is more than just livestock auctions. Yeah, it would be underrepresenting the importance of what's going on there to just pin it to livestock and mobile auctions. It really is an environmental program, and it's got multiple partners. The auctions themselves are only a tool, and just to incentivize villagers, especially farmers there, to participate in participate in the restoration projects by giving them opportunities to sell their cattle after they've participated in rangeland restorations and various other environmental projects there. So in this sense, this research focusing on livestock markets is really by accident. Can you please switch off? I think I'm getting a sound from one of the laptops, please. So, having said that, I would like to thank colleagues that we've been working with since I was introduced to them. First person to introduce me to these people was Tony Palmer. Introduced me to Pearl Sinekuku, who then introduced me to people at the ERS, NMP. In fact, the first time I went there was, I think, in Makoba village, where there was an auction in early 2019. So great appreciation for you guys, and also the partnership in the UCPP community. UCPP stands for uMzimvubu Catchment Partnership Program Partnership. I know we've been trying to think whether or not to drop the P, one of the P's, to just have it as a partnership. In any case, I appreciate and thanks to them as well. The structure of this presentation, more or less, is going to be like this, but you never know with complex presentations. It might not go as planned in this linear fashion, but this is what you sort of have to expect. Just me presenting the technicalities of the land reform project itself and where market access fits in, and then where the case study itself fits in the land reform project. Then I'll introduce to you the complexity theory approach by Paul Cilliers. This is a book, after I met him, I think I met him in 2010, and then I bought this book that year, but I didn't read it up until maybe 5 years later. Yeah, it has profoundly affected the way that I think. I think it's a very important way of looking at socioeconomic systems and beyond, and ecological systems too. Yeah, so I'll present some of his thoughts and how they've guided me in thinking about how to present the story of the upper uMzimvubu catchment. And then I'll use those lessons from Paul Cilliers to depict what I see as a complex system of what's happening in the area, in the study area, and then figure out what is likely, which variables are likely to drive the system and make it grow and make it robust, adaptive, and what are the potential risk areas for this system going forward. And as we know, social systems especially, they just evolving. So are complex systems, because they evolve, some collapse, some get stronger. And then I'll end up by talking about some implications for research and policy. So let's go with market access and the land reform implementation challenges. So I'd first like to start on the column on your left and just give you some data about what's been happening with the land reform project. I've put down some useful references there at the bottom, especially Mkhabelo there. Some of the figures are coming from him, from SSA, from his latest paper in 2022. And then I just want to say that the land that's used for agriculture in South Africa in 2000, it was sitting at around about 81%. This hasn't changed much. 2021, it's 79%, and this is about 96 million hectares of land. So although agriculture contributes around 3% to GDP in South Africa, because it's a more developed economy compared to other smaller economies on the continent. However, in terms of jobs that are being created in agriculture, the sector is very important. Almost 1 million people are informally or formally employed there. However, there are inequalities, and that's part of the reason why we've got the land reform project. Only 30,000 commercial farmers, approximately 30,000, are producing 95% of agricultural output. And then the millions more small farmers are producing the rest. These inequalities are not only in terms of economic output, but they are also in terms of land ownership. So the reform project itself is key to redress these imbalances. The program or the project is divided into 3 programs, essentially. The restitution program, redistribution program, and security of tenure. Restitution, if I can explain that very simply and say, communities forcibly removed from land would lay claims, legal claims, and then there would be legal processes to verify whether the claims were valid or not, and then there would be that legal process to settle those claims, and then settle the communities back to that land or whatever they decide the rightful owners of the land should happen with the land. That's what would happen. That's one program of the land reform project. And then there's the redistribution program, which really is aimed at encouraging new farmers from previously disadvantaged groups. This is more the commercial wing or arm of the land reform project, because really it's meant at developing Black farmers, Black commercial farmers. Here, government would give farmers grants to make sure that they can kick off their businesses. And then there's the security of tenure, which is really aimed at protecting mostly farm workers from being evicted from farms through this process, post-1994. There's interesting research by Conradi at UCT a few years ago, maybe not a few years ago anymore for me, but she looked at the impact of when this program was still being discussed, how a lot of previously agricultural land was converted into game farms, especially in the Eastern Cape, in the fear that the law would make it compulsory for farm workers not to be evicted, to give them security of tenure in those farms where they had their relatives buried there. But before the law was passed, lots of farms were converted into game farms, and there were lots of squatter camps that mushroomed, especially in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. So those were the unintended consequences of setting up some of these programs. But what I want to say to you is that the programs are different and have different aims. It's not just the land reform project as just one thing. And this also has an implication on the type of issues that have affected the land reform project. They're not the same because there are different aspects to the project. I can group these challenges into 2 main groups. One group is the challenges that are faced before the land is being transferred and then post the transfer of the land. And there are the examples there. For example, before land is being transferred, issues that would be faced are unsettled claims, contestations, conflicts amongst communities themselves, who's in, who's not part of this claim, and then the price valuation issues of the land itself that would be settled, and the compensation that would need to be paid, the administration process being slow, and then, of course, the compensation without, what we call it, zero compensation, expropriation without compensation. That falls under that group before the land has been transferred. All those discussions. And there have been various tools. One of them being the willing buyer, willing seller that government has used to try and, drive the acquisition of the land itself, and then to set up the price, to figure out the price for compensation for that land. So that group of issues, and there are many more, belongs to that category before the land is transferred. And then after the land has been transferred, there are other issues that emerge. Communities still fight about how to manage the land, how to use it, whether it's for business, whether it's for settlements, etc. And then for the communities that have agreed on how to use the land, for example, if they decide to use the land, maybe the way that it was used by the outgoing farmer as a business, then there would be problems around access to funding, access to markets, access to information, access to skills, access to capital, as in equipment, and then just logistics. And then this problem that this particular report is looking at really has to look at the lack of market access as one of those problems, and it falls in that second category of issues. Okay, so those there at the bottom are the references. And then there is this accidental case study. I don't know how it appears on the, sorry, I've just moved up that map there. The wording there at the top, it just puts accidentally in brackets next to the study area. I think I was looking for market access there, but the study area itself, like I said at the beginning, is about conservation. It's about restoration of the soil, restoration of the land, removal of wattle to ensure water availability, various things that are taking place there and driven by various NGOs, academics. The UCPP that I talked about is also a consortium of partners, including us, academics, people on the ground, the community members, villagers, chiefs, leaders, traditional leaders there, various people, very important people, and businesses. So there is the area that we're talking about. That's the catchment there. uMzimvubu goes from somewhere around Lesotho Mountains towards Port St. John's. And that's that area there that we are looking at in the former homeland of the Transkei. And really, if you look at some of the, so those would be the partners, some of the partners being listed there. And when you look at this carefully, you'd see that there's lots of activities that are taking place there. There's various training, various other incentives, rebuilding traditional systems and structures, stewardship agreements. This is all that just goes into making this project a workable project. Market access is just one of the inputs there. In any case, at the end of the day, we've got increased resilience of the environment as outputs from the collective work of the partners, household income, productive heads, improved range quality, reduced degradation of the environment, etc. So it's a much, much bigger project than just the land reform project itself, although it's happening within a smaller geographical area, but its scope is quite vast. Then there are overlaps, of course. The land reform issues overlap with some of the issues that are being encountered in this area. That's why this, as an accidental experiment, is useful for land reform, because issues like lack of access to funding, market information, production skills, business management skills, women, gender issues, transportation issues are key. In fact, the reason why these auctions have been brought, these are mobile auctions in a way that have been organized by the partners there. So to avoid the challenge of farmers having to transport their livestock to formal commercial auctions, the mobile auctions are being brought into the village. So bypassing those barriers that prevent them from participating in markets. But they still need market information. They just like the recipients of land through the land reform project. This is why then this case study is very useful for tackling some of the challenges that I've listed previously that are confronting the land reform project, because the challenges are very similar, if not the same, that are being faced here. And this project has managed to overcome some of them. So this project is not only important for the project, but also for the policy space, for researchers, and also the NGOs that are working there. So,
Prof. Mbatha,
yes.
can I just let you know about time? I think
Time, okay.
if you wrap up in about 5 minutes, that would be great, if possible.
Okay, I'll try. I'll do my best. Attributes of, so you understand why this is important for land reform, but let me then tell you how I've looked and constructed this system based on the attributes, or rather the framework from Paul Cilliers. Systems consist of a large number of elements. They interact dynamically. So it's not just a linear relationships that we have, and then they translate, or there's interactions, there's energy, information that is being exchanged, and these relationships are hierarchical. There are feedback loops. They are open system. They are influenced by the external environment. And history is very important. They are really very much influenced by memory of what has happened in the past. And we know this is very important for social systems. I mean, decolonial history is part of, is based on this understanding. So those are some of the elements of, or rather characteristics of complex systems through which we look at various socio-economic systems as proposed by Paul Cilliers. For economists, it's when you think of the classical circular flow diagram that represents the economy, it's a classical representation of a complex system with feedbacks and feedback loops, with various elements having consumers or households, for example, interacting with firms and producers, buying goods, exchanging money with households and firms, paying taxes to government, and government providing services and products to various elements in the system, and also having an external environment for international trade that affects what's happening in a national economy. Very prototypical illustration of a complex system as described by Paul, although he was a philosopher. Using this approach, this is what we came up with, trying to draw the system that's taking place in uMzimvubu. Sam, I may have to take a little bit more time, maybe 5 minutes extra than I thought. I'm sorry, I just said, thank you. So the elements there would be the stakeholders, environmental NGOs, households, sellers, buyers, parents, youth, for example, relationships. These NGOs have got sometimes formal agreements signed between themselves and the villagers at some point. I think Risha, Risha is online. You might just confirm. I think there's about 193. Yeah. Or 103, I'm not sure, agreements that have been signed with different villagers, somewhere around about there. Yeah, and then the relationships obviously are not all the same in terms of importance, you know, the amount of energy that's being transferred. But for this particular system, this relationship between the business NMP that organizes the auctions and the NGOs that look at the environmental restoration is very important. And so is the relationship with sellers and with buyers. So for markets, these are important, very important relationships. For other things, eco-champs, for example, people working with environment may be more important. The traditional leaders may be more important. in any case, relationships don't carry the same energy, and they also carry different resources as channels of exchange. So we identify 3 markets in this system. You've got your villagers there, their households, and by the way, same people can play different roles in the same system. You can have a farmer who's also a seller, who's also a parent, you can have a researcher who's also a farmer, who's also a seller. So the roles get quite interchangeable. In any case, between the different elements, there are various relationships that are taking place that we've tried to map out. But this is the relationship of interest with livestock, cattle in particular, moving out of the villages and going through these mobile auctions. And some of them go to commercial farmers, and some of them go to outside businesses, abattoirs, butcheries, etc. To date, there's more than 45 million rands since 2014 that has gone through this system. So it's a very important system, but these are competing markets. The commercial markets that have been there are competing with this mobile market. That's why I highlighted them as this is a traditional livestock market where neighbors sell their cattle for ceremonies, traditional ceremonies in the village. So if you can't sell there, you sell there. If you can sell there, but there are barriers to selling at commercial markets. Remember, that was what we said was the challenge to the land reform project for small farmers to find market access to sell at commercial markets. So, however, this work by NGOs here has enabled some of these village farmers and sellers to be able to participate in previously inaccessible markets, commercial markets, because of the skills, because of the assistance with vaccination, branding of their animals, etc. Many, many things they've done. Registration of their animals with the police so that these animals could suddenly be sold at commercial markets. So this program, was put there as an incentive to assist these people. It's had lots of sort of like byproducts, some of them positive, some of them we will see, when we look whether or not they're going to be good for the system is up to question. Some systematic observations. So these small farmers, why this case study is important, because the attributes of these small farmers is very typical to small farmers across the country. They also use land collectively, post-transfer issues, especially just the replication of issues faced in the land reform project. So this is what I'm trying to emphasize here on the left. But there are other things as well. Green economy, because the project here is really about is ecological. So if we're looking at a model for how to run an agricultural green economy, this could be it for policy. Anyway, what do we observe? There are 3 parallel markets, as I've said to you: mobile, traditional, and commercial. The system has been growing, especially in the first 6 to 7 years. Restoration of land, the hectares standing at 20,000 hectares. Revenues have skyrocketed, 46 million sale revenue so far. Been an empowerment of farmers that has opened access to them to participate in other markets. Sometimes the skills mean that the people who've been trained here can find jobs elsewhere and leave the system. So empowerment opens exit routes from the system itself. Some of it is intended, some of it may not be intended. So some of the questions I have had to ask is, how enforceable are the agreements? Are they required? Can we just maybe rely on trust, especially between sellers and buyers? There are some sticky issues that we found through some of our data. For example, sticky issues, fights around prices between buyers and sellers. Sellers claiming that the prices are too low, they're being suppressed. from our surveys, whilst the buyers are complaining that sellers are not aware that, the animals are not really up to good health quality standards and suppressing, they don't deserve the market prices that they're demanding. And really, the correlations between some of these variables are quite high. For example, prices are positively correlated with unit sales, very highly so at 0.77. And then there's also an association with the number of buyers present at the auctions and the prices that are being, the animals are being sold for. So although we're not saying this is causing this, is that we're just saying that there is association, positive association between these variables. So prices are very important, and the relationship between buyers and sellers on issues of pricing is important. What we also observed is that during COVID period, this was not a uMzimvubu issue. It was a very international issue, but it had effects on what happened to the system. Because of lockdown restrictions, we assume that suddenly, and also not just the restrictions to finding income possibilities just blew up the system. A lot more cattle were being sold through this market because people were restricted on their movement. They couldn't go to their jobs and they were desperate for cash. And this system was available, was open there, available, because it was one of those sectors that were emergency sectors that was allowed to. So this had a very big positive impact on the system. This is our observation from the data. However, beyond lockdown, trends have been declining through market performance, and we need to be cautious about what is happening here. And also the land under conservation and the number of agreements has not increased by much since 2019. I just want to give you a highlight of some of these trends. And we see with all the variables that there is an increase, for example, in the total number of stocks being sold per year. And then just after 2019, it went down, but COVID period came, things went up again. And the same thing, when we look at the peaks, 2018 and 20, somewhere around about 2020, 2021, that's where we're finding peaks. 2021, the average conversion rate of animals sold, people really bringing their animals and making sure that the animals are being sold is what you define as a conversion rate. The number of animals brought into the auction and then sold after they've been, because there is a bidding process. You can decide to withdraw your animal if you don't like the price. But the conversion rate was very high during the lockdown period. So almost for all the variables, we see a similar pattern. So what we're worried about is what has been happening since 2021, because we're starting to see declines. And some of the issues, the qualitative issues could be around the level of trust. Also, some unintended consequences of empowering the farmers so that they can suddenly start withdrawing their cattle and selling those cattle elsewhere because they are now empowered. I'm not sure what was happening during the lockdown period, whether they had access to Cedarville, which is very far from them. So maybe that restricted their movement to those commercial markets, and then it got them bound to participate in the markets that were being brought into the villages themselves. In any case, we need now to think about what the implications of this are. Lockdown period, was it a blessing in some ways? We know that the system should be naturally evolving, but if we think the system has brought about positive lessons for policy, positive gains for the communities, skills development, how robust, how can we make it more robust? Those are the questions that are facing, especially the people who are organizing, directly involved and part of the system. We should be worried about low participation numbers. What do we have to do about buyers? How do we grow the number of buyers? Because we can see from the data that there's a positive relationship between the number of buyers and prices. Women participation has remained an issue, although the data indicates that there are fewer women who are bringing cattle into the market. But many of these women are sending their grandsons, their sons, to come and sell the animals. So they are participating, but they can't be observed through our means of collecting the data. So those are important dynamics that we need to look at. How do we improve trust, for example? How do we improve the level of competition for higher prices? For example, if buyers were not traders, buying so that they could sell elsewhere, buying from the village so they could sell elsewhere. These are issues that we need to confront. And what will happen to market access for these small farmers? For example, if this system were to collapse, then the villagers themselves would not be receiving the empowerment that's been coming from the NGOs who are working on environmental issues. It means the animals will not be getting vaccinated, will not be getting the branding. And then eventually they won't be able to take them to the commercial markets where they've now been allowed to take them. So, and I'm not sure to what degree the villagers themselves are aware about the importance of this system and just how complex it is in terms of the linkages. So, but it is clear that for government investments, for example, into assisting small farmers in South Africa, this system is providing lots of lessons, not only in estimating what value should be invested into empowering them with skills and providing the services that have been provided for by the NGOs. So this case study is important for many actors, for policy, for the people there, but also for researchers. Cost-benefit analysis, studies for different aspects of the system, for me, are clearly visible for us to identify as possible research areas. Yeah, what to avoid and what not to avoid if we want to replicate this system. I think the lesson from 2024 lessons are there for us. Just this system itself, to put it into another province, and then this system itself to be adopted by government. You know, what are the variables that have posed risks that we need to avoid, and what are the positive things that we can take out? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Mbatha. That's great. I see you've really compressed a ton of stuff into a relatively short space. So what I'm going to do before anything else is just hand straight over to Dr. Muchara as the respondent. So
you can override me, yeah.
Great. And then I guess Dr. Muchara will just need to upload his presentation.
Thank you very much, Sam. Let me upload my presentation.
Great.
Can you confirm that it's showing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cyril, for taking us through your complex engagement, which is quite useful in the modern day South Africa and Africa in general. And thank you, Sam, for facilitating the discussions, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege for me to be a respondent to Cyril's discussion on land issues intertwined with market access, the livestock markets, and the household dynamics that happen at local community level. Just to introduce myself, I am uMzimvubu. I am from the University of South Africa, specifically from the Graduate School of Business Leadership. I'm going to take you through my presentation, and I hope it will be short. I will try to be as quick as I can so that at least we still have the audience to engage us on this research. My research is in my presentation, my response to Prof. Mbatha's paper is entitled Cattle Markets in Rural South Africa and Opportunities for Alternative Models. In terms of the structure, I'm going to give a recap of the complex theory that Prof. Mbatha discussed, an overview of the rural livestock value chains and markets, economic thinking around the livestock value chain, and the sources of inefficiencies along the livestock value chain, and then look at possible marketing models. The importance of what Prof. Mbatha discussed, it's actually a reality of what we look at when we start to analyze smallholder farmers. They survive within a complex system that is so intertwined that you may not realize that their system is complex. And I want to thank Prof. Mbatha for taking time to actually define what this smallholder farmer looks like. When we often implement models such as land reform to empower farmers, we are looking at giving them access to resources, giving them access to means of production, but rarely do we go to analyze the complexity in which we are allocating these resources. These are good empowerment programs for livelihood, but if you look at the way these farmers operate and their livelihood systems, you realize that it's not just about the land, it's about the production systems. It's about what enterprises that they're doing on those lands, crops, livestock, the interdependencies between those crops and the livestock, the interdependencies of the role of the land as the environment to sustain those enterprises, the role of the household to sustain whatever production systems that is happening on the land. And some of the benefits that come out of those enterprises, your sources of fertilizer, your manure, then the markets come in as well, but they come in as drivers of those production systems. So it's quite a complex nature, it's quite a complex system. And when we analyze them, in most cases as agricultural economists from the school of thought that I come from, we normally take one unit at a time. And we often try to rely on linear models that often analyze one sector at a time. We often push our researchers to say, look at livestock, which livestock are you looking about? Look at the cropping systems, focus this on maize or on wheat. The moment the research starts getting intertwined into livestock, crops, land, markets, it becomes complex, and we often shy away from that. So thank you very much, Prof. Mbatha, for taking us through such a complex model. And I'm going to give a snapshot of those responses. We have rehatched some of these challenges that we face, both as researchers in trying to understand this complex system and as farmers who benefit out of our research, and as executors and as businesses and industries who are there to drive these markets and these enterprises. In terms of the livestock value chain, I'm going to focus mostly on the smallholder livestock value chain. Why smallholder value chain? It's because these are the major beneficiaries of the land reform programs that Prof. Mbatha has talked about. Most of them, they started as smallholder farmers with the hope that they are also going to commercialize, commercialize. They may have inherited land that was commercial in terms of production systems because it was owned by one single commercial farmer. But because of the discourse that happens within the land redistribution, land restitution, land tenure, it end up in another hand who happens to be one of our smallholder farmers, black, predominantly black farmers, and they own this land either as cooperatives, collectives, or as individuals, depending on the model through which they've inherited or they've taken over the land. So when they come in there, they are going to practice smallholder livestock farming. If they are lucky and they are funding, they can start commercial, which is very rare. Most of them, they start as small, and then they get lots of empowerment programs through different channels, NGOs involved, as we have heard about the NGOs being involved with the farmers in uMzimvubu, and then and then some of them, they get support from government, mostly extension, support institutions, your National Agricultural Marketing Council, very active in trying to push issues to do with market access. I think that's their core business there. So when you understand the livestock markets, we do have cattle. And then these livestock, as they go into the production systems, it is evident that almost every community, they do one form or another in terms of livestock, either into cattle, chickens, sheep, goats. But all these livestock from the smallholder farmers, most of them, they are consistent in terms of their attributes. One, they have mostly long distance to the markets, especially if you look at livestock markets. Long distance to the market, short value chains. By short value chain, I mean those value chains that are mostly, reliant on local markets from producer to the final user. No intermediate processing that happens, no third parties that handle those products in between. It's just from the producer to the consumer. Limited size and local markets, limited understanding of the requirements of the formal markets. So mostly these are dominated by informal markets, most of these livestock markets, where you have one household, one community member selling to another, either for consumption or for cultural purposes to fulfill rituals, or just for someone who wants to produce as well. So they are using them as their breeding stock. And then we also have limited access to inputs. If you look at most of these livestock, I tell you, if you go some of these rural communities, you ask them, have you ever bought any medicine for your cattle? They haven't. They just survive in the natural grazing. And there are those that also invest a lot in terms of the market, input markets, buy chemicals, dose their cattle, give injections at the right time so that they actually maintain a good stock. But efforts to ensure that farmers participate effectively have not sustained. There are lots of initiatives, as I've told you, from the Department of Agriculture, from National Agricultural Marketing Council, from NGOs, from researchers. But the levels of success of all those initiatives, they vary depending on the recipients and depending on the effort that have been put in place in order to benefit these farmers. But what is the economic thinking around these livestock markets? As economists and as researchers, we often drive these markets from a neoclassical economics, where we desire to see a well-functioning markets, a Pareto optimal efficiency within these markets. We desire to make sure that there are minimum market failures, there are minimum distortions on the market. That's why you see ourselves complaining much about pricing, talking much about poor prices that these farmers benefit, receive from the buyers. We complain that most of these markets are dominated by few big farmers. So those are market failures that we always strive to make sure we eliminate when we talk about the livestock value chain. But within that, there is that complexity of the intertwined nature of this market, of this production system with the household dynamics. In rural communities, you often find that one farmer is a producer and is a seller of the livestock, and there's a buyer as well, because we buy from each other. We are consumers of the same livestock. And for those that have significant commercial interest, they are also commercial owners. So in other ways, they're also business owners. So that's where the complexity comes in. So you may not have one size fit all approach in terms of resolving some of these issues that Prof. Mbatha highlighted. So what are these sources of inefficiencies? I'm not going to spend much time on this because Prof. Mbatha have already highlighted some of these issues. The issues to do with livestock diseases, cattle rustling. We have had, especially in the Eastern Cape, Matatiele areas and all those we have had lots of people, syndicates of people who steal cattle, making actually the smallholder farmer suffer more. They have less number of livestock, but we have these cattle rustling syndicates. Health compliance requirements for meat traders. It's actually another problem. That's why you cannot just slaughter your cow and start selling meat. We can slaughter for household consumption, but rarely do we do it for business. Otherwise, healthy compliance and regulatory requirements start, catching up with you. And then we have the challenges of price distortions, limited grazing capacity. We have often seen vast tracts of land, and we often say, oh, but there's so much grazing. But is that land really rich enough, or does it provide enough grass to sustain production systems? You can have 1,000 hectares, but only to have 10 or so livestock, and it's still not enough for them to graze for the year or for the whole year. So in as much as we have vast tracts of land, Is it sustainable enough? Are they rich enough? Are they fertile enough? Do we have the right felt to sustain these production systems? Often it's no. And because the fact that the land is big does not mean that that land is sufficient, offer sufficient grazing. So we often find ourselves supplementing these livestock. If we want to produce a better beast, a better animal, we end up supplementing so that we can fetch better market prices. And then to what extent can these inefficiencies be eliminated? I'm asking this question because once we eliminate these inefficiencies, then we are almost closer to finding a better market for the farmers. But if I think all the models that are coming in, we have heard about the marketing model, the mobile markets that Prof. Mbatha brought in. It's about eliminating inefficiencies of market access, distance to the market, hence the mobile that takes the market to the people. So, but what are the important dynamics in terms of the livestock markets? Highly informal when we talk about livestock markets and smallholder farmers. It's highly informal. And to what extent does commercialization of this sector improve the returns to the farmers vis-a-vis the costs that comes with formalization? As economists and as most practitioners as well, we always want to see farmers selling. Is it the right approach? I am not sure. And at smallholder levels, if you can look at my red bullet at the middle, it says maybe we need to ask ourselves, what is important, producing for food security at household level or producing for the market? That is commercial. We often drive the markets. It's good to drive the markets. But maybe, let me speak of maybe somebody who is in government or a political figure. Is it important that farmers are marketing, or it's important that his constituent is well fed and they've got good capacity in terms of there's no malnutrition, there's less dependence from the government, from relief? I would say possibly they would say as long as people are food secure, they are healthy, it's good for them. But however, we cannot neglect the market because the world that we live in, we still need that money to sustain other economic activities that happens within the household, be it paying school fees, be it buying supplementary food, alternative food sources and all that. So we need the market. Hence now the pressure of integrating the two systems from production for food security and the market. But it can still always be a debate as to where are we really heading to? Do we want to commercialize everyone, or we still need that food security production at local community level? So what is the likelihood of extending contract marketing to cattle sector as a restocking exercise? Because one of the challenges within these farmers is restocking. Farmers lose cattle through droughts. Farmers lose cattle through natural disasters, diseases, theft that I was talking about. And are there any programs, are there any initiatives for contract farming to ensure that the restocking exercises takes place? In as much as we're talking about markets, markets are driven because of the volumes of production. It's high time we also focus on the restocking exercise so that these smallholder farmers can have good market takeoff. They have sufficient numbers on the ground. But as we restock, I think Prof. Mbatha will start asking me, what are you saying about environmental degradation? What are you saying about the grazing, depletion of grazing? Of course, we need to restock, obviously, and enhancing the production systems. That's where the supplementary feeding come in. That's where other markets that can be done by the same smallholder farmers, stock feed production can actually happen at community level. I will handle that type when I'm looking at the alternative marketing models. So when we are talking about the markets, the types of markets, Prof. Mbatha talked more of the mobile stock market, which is a very good model because that model has answered one problem that we have had: lack of access, because farmers are distantly located from the markets, from the formal markets. So what does this model do? It allows the buyers to come together, and then sell their livestock on one market closer to the farmer. So you can organize as many mobile markets as possible within different localities, so that if you miss one market in village 1, you can still sell in village 2. You miss a market in village A, you can go to your neighborhood in village B to sell your livestock, depending on the pressure that you have to get market. So this is a good model, and I think if it can also be strengthened and properly managed, because this is an old model that has existed in the communities for long, and but it has never had good structures or structures that are really formally recognized and make sure that this model becomes efficient and efficiently managed in terms of coordination, in terms of pricing, and in terms of actually making sure that the farmers know how the grading systems happen on this mobile market. The alternative market.
Dr. Machado, sorry to intervene. Can you start wrapping up around now, or in the next few minutes, if you can?
Yes, I can. I think I'm almost there. The other model that we can also talk about is the marketing center model. In the cropping side, I think this has always been driven with a name, agri-park concept, and it's very dominant in South Africa. We can also bring in the same concept within the livestock markets, where we bring in all this infrastructure on one point. Then they can be able to there will be buyers on the same auction floor. There will be buyers, but on the same sender, there are also suppliers of inputs. You can actually drive in your feedstock production within the same marketing sender. You can actually drive the input supply in terms of chemicals, in terms of all the resources that are needed. Training for livestock, farmers can come in and actually attend training sessions for livestock ownership. In terms of who owns these marketing center models, it can be a co-ownership, community-based. What is stopping all these land reform beneficiaries coming up? As they have the livestock farm, they can also own this sender. They control the auction. They also produce feeds for those that want to supplement. The community members can actually come in and buy their inputs from these small same farmers. And we have also seen the emergence of livestock bank models. We have seen livestock banks coming up as a way of formalizing the unbankable community members. So this is another model that is coming in. I haven't really done research about this. How sustainable is this model to the farmers? It has been launched to make sure that smallholder farmers can bank, can secure their borrowings by putting those their livestock through a livestock bank. They can borrow and leverage those, and they can also save. But to what extent can this benefit our farmers? I think this is an opportunity possibly for those researchers within this room to be able to actually investigate this more and the practical implication that this can have in driving the livestock markets at the raw level. We have also this collective farming model, which is very generic, which is very common. It doesn't have good results in the South African context, and I think in other African countries. But in Kenya, I've learned in other sectors, dairy, smallholder dairy farming, it has really worked wonders to the point that we have cooperative banks in Kenya because of collective action, cooperative banking systems and all that. This can still work. We simply need to make sure that we get the culture right of cooperative farming, psychological capital, and retraining farmers and assuring them about the benefits of collective and cooperative farming. Mostly it drives their market offtakes. You have power in numbers. So we simply need to make sure we get the right culture there. And in conclusion, what is the role of big abattoirs in developing smallholder farmers? This is a question. Can they do contract farming? To what extent? What is the possibility of success? Maybe we need to look at that. And as we approach land reform, we need to make sure that any land reform programs is well integrated into the value chain thinking. What is going to happen with those beneficiaries, and how are they going to drive the markets, and how are they going to drive their growth? Thank you very much, Sam. I may have exceeded by a minute or so, but thank you very much. Over to you.
Well, thanks a lot. Well, thanks both to you, Prof. Mbatha, and to you, Dr. Machado. Really fantastic, very holistic approaches to these issues and to this whole subject. Okay, we now have arrived at the question and answer session. There was a technical problem earlier where people were unable to type in, but that should be fixed. So people can type in, but then we're also going to take questions directly from the room. I don't have a view of the room, but those in the room can pose questions to Prof. Mbatha and also to Dr. Muchara if necessary. So let's go ahead with that, unless you, Prof. Mbatha, want to first directly respond to Dr. Muchara quickly.
No, yeah, no, I'm not. I just want to say thanks, Dr. Muchara. I'm going to steal your illustration of on the farm complex system, but at like a farm level. I like your interaction with the soil, with the actual natural environment in your value chain at a farm level. Thank you for that. No, let's rather give the people who've attended a chance, especially the people who are directly affected by this work. Many of them are online. Sam, so I think maybe let's start with them, especially the guys from uMzimvubu. Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm going to start reading out the questions that have been typed in, and other people must just feel free to keep typing in. And of course, they're also welcome to come in verbally if they like. Okay, so the first question we have
is this person able to speak? Maybe I don't know who asked the question. Are they able to just you can unmute them? I think that would be better, Sam.
Yes, I think people can come in. No, they are able to unmute themselves. So yeah.
Are you saying that they can unmute?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. I see there was a question that was posted around the viability. I'm not sure by who. Can you ask that person to come to the front and just maybe say who they are and then.
Yeah, okay. So it's Miss or Mrs. Chuma seems to ask the question. If they're here.
Okay. Okay. Let me go back to the original plan. Maybe that's what is there. Are there any questions in there?
We have a hand by James Gambita. So
James Gambita. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Mbatha, and thank you, let me see, Chara, Dr. Mchara. Brilliant presentations both. I think we are really making progress in terms of understanding complex livestock production systems. And Prof. Mbatha actually alluded to Celia's work, a more current conceptualization of systems thinking which build on socio-ecological systems is by Anderis et al. 2022. It speaks to key issues which Dr. Chara alluded to, the resource system, the resource users, looking at also provide physical infrastructure and soft infrastructure and infrastructure providers. I was actually smiling when both presenters were giving their work. It feels like hand in glove when we look at this theoretical lens in interrogating these complex problems which are facing us. And Dr. Chara, you actually alluded in your response. Do we look at the environment or do we look at livelihoods? I think it's using both perspectives. You are looking at a sustainability angle or sustainability view, where you are looking at improving people's livelihoods, but also at the same time, trying to improve the resource base. I'm actually proud of both speakers. It's really brilliant. I've been working with livestock system for over 40 years, and I can see you are actually making headway. Keep up the excellent work.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, do either of you wish to respond to that, or
Are there people from Matatiele? Maybe we should ask that question directly. Are there people from Matatiele in the audience who would like to give you a chance to respond and to comment first, please? If there's somebody from uMzimvubu or from the UCPP, I see there's Nosi, but Nosi is part of us in a way, but she's done lots of work. And I mean, I'm just talking about the people that I can see, but I know that there are lots of people who from, is there anyone from Matatiele, please? None. Okay. So maybe we then should go to the questions as you had them listed there, Sam, on the side, and then see if the people who've posted can speak. If they can't speak, you can just read out the question so we can move on.
So
thank you, Prof.
Yeah, I'm looking at the first question here. It's about the implications of security of tenure. If nobody wants to articulate that, I'll just go ahead and read it. Okay.
So
it says,
who is the question by?
By Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Schumer.
Don't you want to start with the questions at the top? There's the questions at the top that you may be missing, Sam. If you scroll up.
Yeah.
No.
So no, that's this is the first question.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
All right. I'm going to read it. It says the implications of the security of tenure have resulted in landlessness. How do we redress this debacle? This question is for Prof. Mbatha. I'm interested in the subject matter. Should I read that again?
No. I got it. I'm thinking about it. Can you read another one?
Yes, of course.
Can I respond to the one that Mzu showed to me first before I forget? There's a question. I'll come back to the security of tenure. It's not really my area, as you've seen that I'm more redistribution and restitution, but I'll go back to what I think about. I haven't thought it properly, but I'll give it a go. But to the question on whether or not we think smallholders are a viable business, the question is so complex in a sense that, as you can see in this particular case study, that the model is in such a way that the costs for running this particular livestock business are externalized. The farmers are not carrying the full costs. They're not paying for things like registration of the animals, vaccination, just the skills are carried, lots of the costs are carried by the NGOs. If the NGOs were to pull out, would they be still able to run these businesses? It's the question that I ended up with. Then we might regress back to a situation where access, commercial markets are no longer accessible. So in that sense, then this kind of a business would not be practical for this type of a farmer in South Africa. But I also want to say that in Kenya, like Mucharas did say, that in Kenya we find like smallholders, that's the way, whether it's in crops, whether it's in livestock. In fact, I started off by saying that the first survey or the first research leg for this type of work started in Kenya, in the east, around Eldoret. There you find auctions on a weekly basis where villagers are going to those auctions and selling their animals and importing them from countries like Ethiopia. So it's quite a viable business, but it's very different to the way that this model presents the business, because this model is more about the environment. The business is part of the environment. So the costs and the benefits are not only for the farmers, but they are also for the ecological system. In Kenya, the environment is paying the price for lots of the business productivity that's taking place there. Nobody's looking at land overgrazing, you know. So Professor Gambisa, said that the model should encompass, we should think about the environment. Who is paying for the environmental costs? How are we paying? Because the environment is not going to speak for itself. You know, it's not going to charge us. It's just going to get degraded. Well, I guess in the end, when it can't produce anymore, we're going to suffer. But you see, that's what is. I'm just trying to contrast what is happening in Kenya and what is happening in South Africa in this model in particular. So it's a yes and a whether or not in the long term these farmers would stand on their own, I doubt. In South Africa, especially in a model where they have to pay for the benefits that they receive from the environment. I doubt it very much. So the public as a whole would need to subsidize a model that works like this. But it's similar to education. Education is a public good. Really, we can't afford public education, but because it's subsidized, most of it by government, because of its external benefits, lots of people are able to access education. If we can treat these businesses in the same manner, or the land reform project we think about it in the same manner, then we probably could afford it, where the public policy supports the protection, restoration of the environment, whilst also supporting the emergence of, and I think that's the only way in which I see. That's why in the end I ended up saying that how much needs to be invested into the system is important. The NGOs have illustrated to us the value, the actual monetary value that we can now take as a price tag to government agencies and say, this is how much for this particular area with these types of systems and these activities that are taking place there. So it's a model for us that we can learn from for the. So that is my long question around, response around that. Around the Muchara, do you want to say something whilst I think more about security of tenure?
Yes, that question was actually also addressed to Dr. Muchara if he wants to come in on it. I can read it again to you if you'd like. You're muted, sir.
Thank you very much, Sam. You want me to tackle the issue of security of tenure, or the one that is sustainability of smallholder farmers?
Okay, so the question that Prof. Mbatha has just answered about how sustainable is the smallholder farmers, and is it a good model for SA?
Yeah.
That was also addressed to you if you'd like to take it, and then there's another one for you as well.
Thank you very much. When I was looking at the question, I think I was saying to myself, maybe as an economist, I would say it depends on how we want to define sustainability. This is the discourse that comes in about the food security versus market-oriented farming. It's sustainable and it's feeding millions of people in South Africa and in Africa. Most of these people, they actually produce their own food. They produce at household level. And of course, a few are the ones that are also making it for the market and commercially, maybe, producing for the markets. But in terms of sustainability, I think this is the debate that we're having here today. We are doing all these smallholder farmers sustainable, either from a production perspective, from a market perspective, and from a long-term sustainability. It's the smallholder farmer that we have in Africa. It's relatively different from a smallholder farmer that we have in most of these developed economies. You go to Netherlands, you go to the US, you find someone who is relatively very small, but making millions in US dollars. So it's relative, but we still have a potential in South Africa to make smallholder farming communities more sustainable. That's my opinion. It's not a very clear-cut answer that you can get about that. It's point of debate for our research. That is what is driving our research, actually. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Muchara. So there's another question addressed to you directly as well. I'll just read it out. It says, is the restocking problem and addressing environmental calamities not intertwined with infrastructure development? And what has been done so far?
Yes, it is intertwined. You can't separate those two. When you start the restocking exercise, you need to think about the environment. If you start restocking and you are purely surviving on extensive farming systems, natural grazing, it's good. It gives us good meat, good quality meat, natural meat. But at the end of the day, it's not sustainable. When the numbers starts growing and swelling in communities, you run out of your grazing land. There is no time for replenishment. So that's when we need now to say, the more we restock, the more we start thinking about other practices to integrate the production systems. That's where the feedlots comes in. That's where the issues to do with environmental protection. How do we dispose of the output of the byproducts, the waste of the feedlot systems? So it has to be integrated. It's not a straightforward thing, but for now, we need numbers so that we can also start thinking of integrating those models that actually talks about sustainable disposal of waste, sustainable production systems, sustainable feeding without degrading the environment. It's happening. In Europe, they don't have as much land as we have, but they're producing lots of livestock. How are they doing it? I think there are models out there. We are not the first. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Prof. Mbatha, do you want to come? Yes.
Chair, so so here's a thought to Ngwele Themba Chuma. Although I'm not an expert on security of tenure, I just referenced you to a research a few years ago by Beatrix Conrad at UCT, who looked at those effects of people being evicted from land because the owners of the white commercial farmers were evicted them out because they wanted to prevent a situation where workers could start making claims on the land. So that happened. So my thinking is probably that why don't we apply the restitution process for these people? So use one element of the land reform project. Remember, I spoke about three wings of the project. The first program being this security of tenure, and then the restitution, and then the redistribution. Restitution is about ensuring that people who've been disadvantaged by apartheid laws, that they are redressed. But in this case, it's the very law or part of the law, security of land tenure, that has ensured that these people are being forcibly removed from the land. So yeah, it has to be a political decision that is made that if you can prove, for example, that just before this law was enacted, you were evicted out of a farm by your boss who then converted it into a game farm, then you get compensated. So we apply the same principles of restitution to the people who've been unintendedly so been affected by security of tenure. That's one way that I think we can do it, just thinking about it on my feet. Sorry, Chair, there was a question here in the room.
Yeah,
so there are three questions here in the room. Do you guys want to just get closer to the mic and then you can? Please, you can start first. Yeah.
Oh, yes. My question is directed to
so that people can hear you.
My question is directed to Prof from UNISA, the School of Economics.
Dr. Mutare, yes.
Yes, to Dr. Mutare. Like you spoke about the livestock value chain. So my question was like, who is the driver of those chains? Is it producer driven or is it buyer driven? And what are the implications of that in the long run? In the long run of the project, the mobile market. And if the local
You need to have one question. Just one question. Okay, Chair, we'll take 3 questions and then over to Muchari if that's okay.
Yeah, great.
3
So you go
different
ahead.
people.
I can't see the room, so just you direct that.
Okay, so second question, please.
Okay. So mine
is it for me or is it for both? Is it
you especially, you in particular, but both can answer.
All right.
Welcome.
Okay, fine.
With regards to the sustainability topic or aspect of the discussion, I was just wondering if there is any educational program that is directed at the farmers in the village. So are they aware that they depend on these NGOs and that if they would pull out, the system collapses? Do they have knowledge of how they could gain more independence by, do they have the knowledge of how they could immerse themselves into commercial market where the project not to be there to provide everything for them? And do they understand the sacrifices that came with bringing the project to them, such that they have the understanding of how important it is that they should take it? Yeah, just an educational aspect on them as independent thinkers.
I get it.
Yes.
Get it. Okay, third question.
I wish I had a lot of time.
Just one question.
I wish I had a lot of time. Because, the land issue is very emotive for me. I get emotional when we start talking about land. And so, because at the moment I'm busy reading, Max Weber, and he's saying stuff like, empirical science or social science in general cannot provide us with what ought to be done, what we should do. It can only tell us what we can do. So providing these models that both the professors here have provided. But for me, that doesn't sound true, and in this case, I'm thinking the fact that human beings, on the other hand, we can't use the generative mechanism we use in science of discovering what is the causes underlying, our behavior. Rather, it is from the thinking that we already have, this consciousness, these values that we have, and we impose on nature. So right now, I feel like, the focus on restoration and distribution, but then we're leaving aside, and especially for us, the youth today, we're leaving aside the groundbreaking issue of social structure itself, which, I'm saying this because much of the things that you are emphasizing about efficiency, those things, if you read the developmental, the underdevelopmental literature in Africa, people like Claude Ike will tell you that those are not causes of underdevelopment. Those are like symptoms. You see, we are addressing the symptoms and making compensation over the symptoms and not the generative mechanism. The land was taken. Black people had a lot of cows before all this, industrial revolution. So it's like we have to go back to that question. And for us, I'm saying this for us, the youth. For example, I come from Limpopo. My parents were the first generation to descend from the mountain ever since the Mfecane period, you see. So now the mines are happening in Limpopo. Young people want to go into the mines or leave, because remember, when the land was taken, it was so that we can be squeezed out of the homelands and go underground and dig minerals that we cannot even own. This supply of labor has been overextended, and now we are just stuck in the urban areas unemployed, So the land question has to be addressed. We can't do this whole thing of commercial, we're going to pay for, and we're going to find out some information before. But the issue with taking the land back is a question of responsibility. Collectivism is all honky-dory and stuff, but there's this weird part about responsibility. Privatization means that the person who is privately owning the land is responsible for its maintenance and all those kinds of things. But now the moment we like the whole community owns the land, it's a question of who is responsible for its maintenance and stuff like that, So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I can hear. I can hear. I acknowledge. Claire, do you want us to respond to the questions here, and then okay, all right.
Yes, I think let's do that.
I think the
Okay.
first question was on value chains was for Dr. Muchara. Dr. Muchara, if you can be quick, please, and then
Okay.
I'll try and tackle the two last ones.
Yes, thank you for the first question. I think that's a very relevant question. The person asked whether these value chains are buyer driven or they are producer driven. When we are looking at a smallholder level, most of these value chains are buyer driven. The buyer who controls the market, they also sets the price that are predominantly on the markets. So I can safely say that these markets are buyer driven instead of producer driven. The livestock numbers that we have in the communities, they don't give our farmers leverage enough to bargain for better conditions on the market. So that's where the collective action issues have to come in, so that they have once they have volumes, and once they have good quality products, then they can leverage that. But currently it's buyer driven, and unfortunately, because of the less market power that our smallholder farmers have, there is minimum that we can do, and besides training them to make sure that we grow them much bigger. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, Prof. Mbatha, yeah, if you want to take the other two.
Yes, so the first one is on sustainability. Is there awareness? So you asked that. Is there awareness around? I think there would be awareness to a degree on the fact that, I mean, some of the people get empowered and then they leave the area, they go find work elsewhere, which means that they're making independent decisions outside of the system. So there definitely is an agency there at play. But I think there may be a challenge in, as human beings, often we're very short-sighted when it comes to, especially when it comes to money. Yeah. We see opportunities today, we try and grab them. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're having environmental problems.
Yeah.
So, and then you see this happening at a very small scale, where there are opportunities that are suddenly presenting themselves. Somebody is saying to you, I can buy your cattle at a much higher price, especially now that we're in a better standard. And then you're thinking, today I can make a lot more, without thinking about what the implications might be, say, 1 year down the line, whether or not your animals would still be in this. So that is just the challenge of, I think, human nature, in a sense, that although we can make decisions that are rational, but we would also have, that limitation in future investments, what it means to really, I mean, we see this not just in this market case, but with health issues, how we expose ourselves to conditions and it just is a mind thing. So yeah, with the environment, we degrade it, especially if we can get away with it. If there's no system that can penalize the people who are degrading the environment, can monitor, identify, and penalize, and then we can, especially if we're a collective. Often that's the overgrazing is what we call a tragedy of the commons. When resources are commonly used, and then we've seen this. And if I can't hold you accountable for how you are treating a public resource, then lots of people deplete it or mess it up. And it's kind of like the same thing. This work of the collective here in this, you can treat it as a collective good that people are taking advantage of, especially if they can't be held accountable. So one of the things I think could be done is that one of the questions I said there is, what do we really need agreements if they are not enforceable? Or do we need trust? To just work on trust. It will take community members themselves making collective decisions at a community level to make a decision not to take their cattle in competing markets if they want to protect this particular model with mobile market systems. But it has to be a decision that is done collectively there, where people can hold each other accountable, because they all recognize the other benefits that have come through that particular model for the whole community. Because you are right, the chief would not be happy to have, suddenly the environment is looking very good. There's more grazing land for cattle. They practice rotational grazing. There is more water. The topsoil is being saved. The silt is not going into the river and then into Port St. John's to the ocean. So the loss of benefits. And it's also our job to do studies that expose the value of these benefits for people who are involved. But in terms of appreciation, it's not only an economics research question, it's also social norms, values, respect for one another, even though people don't see what is more important is what you do when nobody sees you. That takes values and also investments into the future, even if you are not around.
Yes.
So yes, so you get it. Okay, thank you. And then social structure. I like that. And I agree with you completely. And part of using complex systems is around understanding that we are almost trying to identify or define the meaning of life as scientists or as researchers, and it's always like an elusive, from some perspectives, the way that we see things from one particular perspective can help us so far, but to prescribe that the solutions or our perspective of viewing things is an end to it all or is an answer to everything would be completely misguided and completely wrong. It's not possible, not even short-sighted. It can't be done. And that's part of what this guy is saying in some of his work, that there's the limitations of methodology and approaches to looking at social and environmental issues. It doesn't matter from where you are coming from, there'll always be those limitations. Your limitation is that you are still probably looking at social structure and social dynamics from a political so from political theory, you talked about Weber and social structure, and it's useful also up to a degree. What other people would argue are not doing is who is talking for the environment. Looks like you are putting people at the center of your understanding of the system, and you are not putting the environment in looking at the interactions amongst the different, say, classes, the different races, but who is talking for water in that particular discussion? So there will always be a limitation to how you are approaching a particular case, a particular study, also depending on how yourself, what your value systems are and what you prioritize to be the most important thing. Environmentalists, will do a different thing. A political scientist would do a different thing. An economist would do a different thing, and they all have limitations. And that's why it's good to work together for us, to help one another with our blind spots. And for things that I possibly can't think about, that you can, so collaborative research is important for that. Multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary research is important for that. Okay, over to you, Chair. Sorry, I took probably longer than I wanted to.
No, that's fine. We're doing well. Yeah, we had some hand claps by Prof. Mbatha at a few points. All right, so there's another one online that I'm going to read by, I think it's by Prof. Meyiwa, who says they can't read it out. So asks me to read it out. So I'm going to do just that. I see they're kind of related questions. So the first is, based on your research, what specific policy changes would you recommend to improve market access for common land farmers? And then the second question is, how can existing land reform policies be modified to better support market integration for these farmers? Okay, so it's not specified who that's going to. So either of you, Prof. Mbatha or Dr. Muchara, are welcome to take this one, or both of you if you desire.
Then maybe we divide them up. I'll take the first one and then Muchara takes the next one.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think a disclaimer is that Dr. Muchara and I, obviously I've told you I've worked, well, Sam told you I've worked at UNISA. We were colleagues before, and we've collaborated on at least one research project that is published and referenced. Yeah, so we can share the responsibilities. Market access. The question was, how do we improve market access for common land farmers based on my research? Was that, sorry, the question from Prof.
Yeah.
Meiwa? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think we need to think about what is the barrier? What constitutes the barrier? What are all the various challenges that eventually become a stumbling block? And both me and Dr. Muchara have talked about, the sub challenges to the bigger challenges. So for example, the challenge of just the misinformation or the lack of information about where the markets are. I might have the resources, but I may not know enough about a particular sector and about how the value chains are, configured and who are the main players. I mean, systems are important, networks, which are systems. Who do you know, the elements, and how much, how much energy is being transferred in the relationships if you had to plug into that network. Some networks may be big in terms of a number of people who are in that network. Some people may have fewer players, but there's lots of resources flowing in that particular network. So that information is important. It's a level of unknown. So it's informational awareness is important as a sub challenge to breaking down the barriers that are preventing access. Then the other one is transportation. You can have, especially for livestock, like big livestock, like cattle, you might be doing everything right, but may not have the resources. I don't know. I mean, some of the buyers in this particular case study are white commercial farmers. Some of them are owners of butcheries, abattoirs. They have to drive through to the villages, and they are complaining that the roads are so bad. And they're so bad in such a way that some of the animals that they had bought, by the time they get to destination, they've got health issues. So these are some of so you can see that in the initial problem was villagers taking their animals to markets, having ticked all the boxes administratively. But now the problem is, where do I get the transportation, the trucks, especially if I'm a small farmer, to take these animals to them. Now that has been solved, the market has moved, the mountain has moved to Muhammad. The market has moved to the village, but it's now the people who are running the business whose trucks are being affected, and they are complaining, and they are bigger farmers. So the issue there, sometimes what they do is ask herders. There are lots of herders from Lesotho who are working in the villages around that area. to take the animals to a particular area from where they would then be collected. That helps. So just identifying all these little hurdles along the value chain that allows farmers to get access is important for especially small common land farmers. And then investing in smoothing out or taking over those costs, as we've spoken before, that these are externalities that somebody has to bear. It's not just about running efficient, profitable businesses. It's just the way of life. Being alive and participating in various events, community events, some of them about livelihoods. And it's not only the responsibilities of the small farmers to ensure social cohesion is happening around land reform. It's a national responsibility. We're paying lots through the tax system, lots of money to support various other communities, and this could be one of the communities, one of the many communities that we are supporting as a collective. So yeah, that's my response there. Muchara, maybe you can go for the next one. And then Sam, I think maybe that would be the last response. Although I did want to say something about Kenya. No, I did say something about Kenya where, where smallholders are very important and very viable, but they don't think so much about the environment as we are doing. So the exports of animals from Kenya are much, much lower, especially when you look at the SPS, the health standards imposed by the WTO for animals or meat to be exported into Europe or other countries. They don't often meet those standards. So there are always pros and cons. You have a vibrant small farmer set up with cooperatives who are competing with big guys, but there are environmental costs associated with that. So which way to go, if you are thinking about business entrepreneurship, the Kenya might be your case. If you're thinking of long-term environmental protection, maybe this model is the right way to think about it. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Cyril. I am going to talk about, this is from Prof. Meiwa, how can existing land reform policies be modified to better support market integration for these farmers? That's a complex question. Again, I think it talks to what we were discussing here, where we want to integrate land reform beneficiaries to the market systems. What I can say, I haven't done research on this, but in my view, I think the most important part is how are we empowering these farmers in terms of market access? So I can imagine a policy system that actually articulates, that actually provide subsidized loan programs and microfinance schemes specifically tailor-made to smallholder farmers, so that can enhance, that can actually give them access to borrowing at lower interest rates with flexible payment arrangements, repayment programs, but leveraging on the land that they would have received as part of the land reform program. I think that can actually help. The current model is that most of these smallholder farmers, they get land as land beneficiaries from government, and these people are mostly funded by government as well through grant system. So the government will either pump in money as a grant to empower these farmers, to develop infrastructure for them, to make sure that they also give them market access facilities. So that may not be sustainable actually it's not sustainable now, and it may not be sustainable in the long term because of the high demand of people expecting to survive from the government. So that can also help to bring up tailor-made products. Sam, over to you.
Thanks a lot. No, just to say, can you put it together, and we're going to have to wrap up now because our time's almost up. If you do have anything you want to quickly add, go ahead. But I just letting you know that we have to sort of close off now.
No, it's fine. From my side, it was mostly to bring up finance that can actually be tapped by smallholder farmers at smallholder level, loan schemes at low interest rates. That's my major policy recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, thanks to both the speaker and the discussants, and thanks to everybody who's asked questions. It's a real shame that we can't actually take all the questions. There's some more in the chat, but we just have to finish up now. We've already gone slightly over time. One thing to note is that you can follow our social media channels. I'll put this in the chat, but it's @Rhodes ISER, one word. And the recording is also going to be made available on YouTube. So thanks to everyone who joined us once again, and have a really great afternoon. And take care.
And we
Goodbye.
will be responding. People can send us questions via email in response to this discussion. Once we've posted the recording of this online, we would follow it. You can also post your questions there or comments. We will also respond there online. So the discussion doesn't really stop here now because of time. It can continue, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really, it's been really productive. Take care.
Thank you. Have you who's recording? Are you recording? Oh, okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.